Hello, and thanks for checking out the video. Today I've turned up at some woodland that I don't really know much about, with a view to having a wild camp, which isn't really the best idea. You know, it's good to actually always do a recce on the areas that you're potentially going to wild camp, so you know you've got somewhere to stay as opposed to hoping you've got somewhere to stay. But I do have a plan B. I can head off a couple of miles up the road to some woodland which I've camped in before. So, you know, I don't want to have to do the extra mileage. I'd rather spend the time getting to know this area of woodland that I don't know a lot about. But yeah, just in case, always good to have a plan B. Unless I suppose you're in a bivvy bag. If you're in a bivvy bag, you've got multiple options really. You know, you can pretty much bed down anywhere. But I, as yet, haven't sorted out a non-synthetic way of bivvy camping, so I'm stuck with a 6-foot square canvas cape or tarp as we'd call it, and a ground sheet and a small sort of twig stove or twig fire bowl. So with those few items of kit, I've got to be in a reasonably good wooded area to set up camp. Nice. Why are these 5 yew trees gathered in this little hollow? been wandering about the forest for a good few hours now, you know, about 2 hours and a bit more, 2.5 hours. And I've come across 3 potential spots, you know, this is one of them, but none of them are really very satisfactory. But I think I'll have to pick one and just go for it. The trouble is there's so many tracks, you know, public footpaths and logging tracks, and you end up being pushed towards the boundaries with fields, you know, towards the edge of the forest. It's not too bad because a lot of the field, well, most of the fields are arable. It seems to be all predominantly the spring cereal that's being sown, so I don't think there'll be any agricultural vehicles going onto the fields, so I'm going to kind of take my chances a bit and end up probably quite close to, in the woodland, but quite close to a boundary with an arable field, because the choice is quite limited. You know, it's typical of the woodlands in the southeast of England. You know, you just can't really get off the beaten track very easily. It's important to follow the game trails if you can when you're walking amongst the bluebells to do minimum damage. So I'm going to pick, you can probably just about see it there, this is probably caused by the deer that we saw earlier. This little trail here, so if I stick to this, we're going to do minimum damage to the bluebells. as you can see, I'm in some hazel, coppiced hazel that's right on the edge of the forest, and just over here is the arable field. You know, not overlooked at all, but if it was early planting or perhaps livestock, you've got a good chance of farmers and vehicles coming through here over this land. But I'm hopeful that what looks like a sort of spring cereal crop isn't going to need much attention for a while anyway. Probably the next thing that comes by will be some kind of spraying pesticide thing, but I'm hoping that won't be today or tonight. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, right on the edge of the forest. It's a slightly sloped pitch as well, which isn't ideal. I don't know if you can see the camps. It looks quite hidden there, but it will be visible when the fire is alight, despite the fire, the windshield covering it. Just beyond the hazel there's some yew trees, so I've tried to keep away from being underneath those. Just because I'm a scaredy cat. Down at the bottom there, that's not a footpath, that's almost like a creek actually. Well, it's dried up at the moment, but slightly damp down at the bottom there, so that's not a footpath. Yes, so there's no buildings or tracks very nearby. It's really just the agricultural activity that you might get when you're on the edge of a forest in the fields. That's the thing to keep an eye out for, I suppose. So why the big deal about trying to find a new camping spot? You know, why not just go back to the wood that I mentioned, or to a place around here that I might have done before? You know, stick to what you know. Well, it's not good to come out when you haven't got haven't done a recce. You know, it's not good to come out when you haven't done a recce generally. It's good to try and push yourself to find new places, and perhaps, you know, little places like this that may or may not work out too well, depending on, you know, the farm activity and things. And then you get more of a sort of collection of potential camp spots in your camping library, shall we say. I find it really useful on multi-dayers, because on multi-dayers you certainly don't want to be going out without an idea of where you're going to camp for the night. I don't think. Like I said earlier, in a bivvy bag you've got multiple options, and you can be a bit more relaxed, and perhaps at the end of the long day and you're a bit tired, you know, you can pretty much throw your bivvy bag down anywhere and cook a ready meal or something like that, or these meals ready to eat, and you know, that gives you that flexibility. But you know, if you're kind of doing more general wild camping, and you're on a multi-dayer, I think it's good to have an idea of where you're going to go each night. It means that at the end of a long day, if you're a bit tired, you know, your concentration's not so good, you might be hungry, you know, you're not going to pick a bad spot. You've got an idea of where you're going to go. You know that little bit of area, perhaps you know the exact camp spot you're going to go to. It just makes things simple on a multi-dayer. So the more of a collection of potential camp spots you can get in your area, you know, the more you can explore it and spend a few nights out and know where you're going at the end of the day, and sort of semi-relax about you know, where you're going to camp and finding your campsite. That's where it really comes into its own, I think, having a great collection. Also, it gives you, you know, when you're plotting out your route and you're doing some kind of exploration of the local area, the spots where you're going to camp can almost become your waypoints. So they'll give you a few points where your route is going to have to pass close by or pass through, and then you can develop your route from there and the areas you want to explore kind of off that route, but always knowing that you've got to get to that next waypoint by sort of late afternoon at the latest, really. Yeah. tonight is pasta. I won't be able to talk much because the wind is probably drowning me out, but as usual I've mixed through the pasta the dried vegetables. Well, in this case dried mushrooms, you know, dehydrated mushrooms, dehydrated at home, very easy to do and lightweight to pack out. So I put the dehydrated veg through the pasta so it rehydrates while it cooks. You know, it's all about saving water. There's also a few soya chunks in there as well for protein. So yeah, we can get those on the go first. And we just cover them with water. Thereabouts. Get those on the go. While the pasta's on the go, I may as well prep up the fresh vegetables. And inside this greaseproof paper bag, some sweet pepper and some French beans. I can use that bag to put the prepped vegetables in. And then all it is some garlic and an onion as well. Yeah, so I may as well get those on the go. It's going to be rather tricky to get them in the bag. Bag of fresh veg. Needs a bit more. Pasta's done, and just leave the lid off just to, well, sort of dry it out really. Just steam off the last bit of water, dry it out, and then we'll probably decant it into this lid. Now we'll put some coconut oil in the pan and we'll soften down the fresh vegetables in it. Oh, it's quite cold today because that's pretty solid. You can't reuse these greaseproof paper bags really. They're not so easy to wash out. Yeah, they're softened down nicely. Just add some seasoning into that. Now we'll try and add the pasta into that. Or some of it anyway. Oh.
And once again I've done far too much for mortal man to eat. Into that some cream, soya cream this is, a bit more soya cream. Just back on the heat for a little bit, a gentle heat.
And there we have it, way too much creamy pasta.
It's actually really nice. Well, that was a reasonable night. Considering we were on a bit of a gradient, it wasn't too uncomfortable really. I wasn't rolling down the hill or sliding down the hill in any way. The sheepskin rug is it's like a grippy sleep mat in a way, you know. It doesn't slide about like some of the possibly some of the plastic ones do, you know. Some of the foil back ones and things like that. They can sometimes be a bit slidey, but this isn't. But it was very cold. The wind dropped off, thank goodness, as the night drew on, and now it's almost completely windless. And of course that meant because the skies were still clear, the temperature plummeted, and I ended up sleeping crossways across the shelter, this sort of angle, to get as much of my body close to the fire as possible to keep it warm, as opposed to the normal way where I sleep with my feet down right at the end of the shelter, because last night it was so cold, even despite keeping the fire going, you know, topping it up every hour or so, still the end of the shelter was still cold enough to make my lower legs and my feet cold. So I kind of shifted position to across the front of the shelter, and then you can feel the full effects of the fire along the whole length of your body. Yeah, made it more acceptable. So it was the usual disturbed night, unfortunately, and a little bit cold feet as well. But yeah, par for the course, I suppose, and not too bad really.